up for this, our third seminar for 2020. Today we are going to be talking water. The title of the session is the Water-Energy-Nexus simulation or serious games for change. He will tell us, Konkone will tell us why he actually chose this topic, this topic. But let me actually give a little background on the presenter today. Today, Mr. Cornell Duploy, right? Duploy, yeah. He is presenting the session for today. He has been working in system dynamics for the past 8 years, mostly in water and energy fields, and employed by the largest energy utility in Africa, ESCOM. To date, he has over 17 papers accepted and presented at local and international conferences on system dynamics. He has been actively driving the development of system dynamics in South Africa as part of the system dynamics, as part of the South African system dynamics chapter. In 2018, he initiated the first system dynamics modeling competition. This year will be the 5th edition, and it's quite an interesting, very, very interesting program. I actually was part of the program in 2020. His passion for spreading and teaching system dynamics has led him to pursue a master in teaching the field in more structured approach for entry level students. In December 2021, he completed his MSc, in which he, of course, he cum laude. So please, I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Kone, and he's going to tell us this evening on water nexus. Please tell us why you chose this topic.
Thank you, Young. I appreciate the introduction. So the Water Nexus, it's one of the projects I'm doing for ESCOM, but I chose the subtitle, Simulation of Serious Games for Change, because I think it's very important for us to recognize that if we as system dynamics want to bring forth change, we might need to start thinking slightly differently about some of our simulations and the roles they can play and how we play them. But this Water Nexus is a very interconnected, and some people would even say a wicked problem in the world, but especially in South Africa. So I'm going to jump into the presentation. And I'm not going to present too long, but I want us to talk about have some interaction happen. So if you want to unmute and ask a question or just raise your hand, please feel free to do that. Young, and I'd like to ask you just to keep notes of the hands if there is any. I'll also try and see it from my side. So I'll go through introduction, a bit of the background, the application itself, some of the results we got so far, and the conclusion. So I want to know from you, do you know Monopoly? So if you know Monopoly, please can you raise your hand on Teams? I just want to see how many of you know the game Monopoly. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Hoffman. Thank you to Boho, Young, Dan. It's almost like everybody has seen the game. Awesome. Thank you. So I want to hear a little bit from you, okay, before I start going off. Do you have a fun or interesting story about your encounters with Monopoly? So in all your games you've played of Monopoly, have you, what is a story that is kind of interesting about Monopoly that you would like to share? So as you're thinking, I'm going to share a little bit of mine. So Monopoly is like a family game. We played it when we were small children, and my brother loved this game, and I grew to hate it because my brother, it takes so long to play the game, and he's so good at it, and I always lose at the end. So it was a fun game initially, but it took so long later that I didn't like playing it anymore. Can any of you share some of the stories you have around Monopoly? I see yes, Bjorn.
No, I say there's a hand up.
Tebo, would you like to share a story about Monopoly?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Yeah, Monopoly is a very interesting game. Yeah, when you lose, you actually lose. It's not nice, guys. It's for you to leave. So I used to play this game with my wife, and what we used to do, everybody is interested in actually buying you know, those expensive houses, ne?
Yes.
So you always want to land on the expensive house, but then you pass the other houses. So what I have learned, I know that one of the rules is you must buy one house in each side before you can actually complete, ne? So I normally bought the cheaper houses, and even if I didn't land in the expensive house. So I realized that although you don't actually buy the most expensive hotels, you can still make a lot of money by buying cheap cheap ones, a lot of them, and actually building a hotel. So that's what I really, and so even if you lose, I know we always, you know, when you are going to parts, I think places, those are expensive ones, you always pray that, you know, I must pass this place, you know, because you're going to pay a lot of money, but you can also make a lot of money from the cheap ones. So that's how I landed the game. She always wins. So anyway, but yeah, but I love the game. I still love it even today. Thanks.
Thank you, Tibok, for sharing that. So what I heard you saying was sometimes, you know, we all want to have the most expensive places, but sometimes the cheaper ones can actually be very useful. Even at the end of the day, if you lose, you at least bought the least expensive ones. That's a really good observation you made. And I see, thanks, Christine, for posting that in the chat. I played the Star Wars edition. We could fight for properties, roll for, wow, that's a very interesting addition to the game. We fight basically for the properties. I would like to play that version. And I want to check if is there anyone else? Just one more story, please. Like, I mean, if Monopoly. Thanks to Boho and thanks for Christine for sharing. Anyone else? They want to share one more story. Yes, Yumna, please.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
My story isn't really one, just that it was also often like a game that we played often with family, but I can say that I've never actually finished a game. Frustrations have always been high, and yeah, I can never say I can say I've never finished a game before, unfortunately.
That's a good point. You know, I also don't know when is it finished when you run out of when the bank runs out of money or when everybody runs out of money? Like I also don't know what the end you know, what is the end game?
Yeah, I don't know what the end is, but our ends were always someone flipping the entire board so all the pieces go off. So that was our official end.
I remember I've got similar memories where all people like they get so angry that they, you know, they start stealing stuff or they throw the board all over the place. So yeah, that's exactly it. You know, thanks for sharing that. Thank you everyone for sharing your stories because I want to bring this. You know, most of us have played Monopoly, and it's a very interesting game. Okay, so let me jump into why I was asking that. So simulations, especially amazing simulations in system dynamics, is often revered and looked up for. But for me, the problem I have is that many of those simulations are seen as crystal balls. So, oh, you've got the simulation on this complex problem, so just tell me the answer. And then people consult that simulation as if it is the ultimate answer, which should have been about changing the way we think and behave, the way we ask questions about that system. But it's often not the case. I've seen it so many times where people want a simulation to be developed so that they can have an answer to a question, which they will then just use as a crystal ball. And behavior change, which is kind of more oriented to what I think what we are called for in system dynamics, is to affect the way that we think and act in those systems. We actually need an experience, not just information. Information alone is great. You can go read a book, and sometimes books does give you a slight essence of behavior change, but there's very few individuals that really are able to embrace information into change. So my question would then be is how can we actually experience simulations the way that we've experienced Monopoly and have this entrenched feeling and experience of what the game is about? And that's what I'm proposing here. What if we can create immersive simulations? And isn't that then similar to a game? I'm going to use the next few minutes to kind of show you what I mean with that. So, but before I do that, I want to ask you, why do you think we play? I'm going to just pause here and check anyone can ask you, why do you think we play? Yes, Teboho.
We have different reasons. The most important one is to win. But yeah, but mostly I think we play for fun. It's fun, and sometimes you learn a lot on the fun as well. Having fun, you can actually, like for example, Monopoly. You learn how you can then learn that if you buy an expensive house, it will take you time to actually pay that house. But I can buy cheaper houses where I can still make much more money closer to when I buy an expensive house. So you can turn that into reality by just playing a game.
Sure. Teboho, thank you for sharing that. That's you're like paving the way forward with me there. And thank you, Christine, in the chat as well, to have fun. So Teboho, you also said have fun. And you also showed that we can actually learn in this playing arena. Christina says, I also like the socializing part. Team sports and games are my favorite. And that's true, that it's not just about, playing this game. It's about the interactions between us, the collaboration, the relationships we build. And that's the interesting part of the play, right? The game may end, but the relationship that's being built in that process is something that's ongoing. It goes beyond the game. So thank you for sharing both of those. I think those are very, very true. Any last person who would like to add anything additionally to why do we play? Any more ideas? Oh, thanks, Christine. So the creators of SimCity based the game off of Forrester's urban dynamic. I did not know that. You just blew my mind, Christine. Thanks for sharing that. Not sure. Oh, wow. Okay, I wasn't planning on sharing it because I didn't know that, but that's brilliant. Thank you, Christine. So, if you ever played SimCity, SimCity. The game is actually based on Jay Forrester's urban dynamics. Which, if you know a little bit about system dynamics, that is one of the legendary models in the field. Thank you for sharing that, Christine. So what I think is play is kind of interactive, and it's engaging, and it's rewarding. I wouldn't say these are definitely the only reasons, but do you see that it's interactive, engaging, and rewarding? And oftentimes that's why we keep playing and we building those relationships and learning, and it's fun. So examples of board games, I'm just going to list a few here. It's Monopoly, like we just explained, but Monopoly teaches us something about capitalism. And I'll come back to that. The beer game in the system dynamics field is another one. It teaches us a lot about logistics. And if I could put another one here, I would now put SimCity there. But it's a board game, but yeah, that's a really good suggestion. And I want to just give you a little bit of a background. The landscape in gaming has been changing. I mean, since the advent of technology, the way we know it, it's been going virtual, not just on a physical board game anymore. Then you've got online games where people actually play not just on a device, but actually on a global scale or internet wide base. And then we've also got multiplayer virtual online games, and this has been growing significantly, where you and your friends, doesn't matter where you are sitting, you can actually play games together anywhere in the world at the same time. At the click of a button, you're interacting with each other. So the landscape has been changing around games. And my question then would be, isn't this an opportunity for system dynamics as well? I mean, just with considering SimCity, I think it's already been seen as an opportunity, but are we utilizing it in the new field where we are at now? I just put this picture down because a lot of people would say, oh, but why are games important? So if you look at the amount of money that games have been growing in the past few years, this is actually from the World Economic Forum. You can see that in the last about 10 years, the mobile gaming industry has exploded. And this is the amount of money that they are making. And Donella Meadows, in her book Thinking in Systems, said we will allocate money to that which is valuable to us. So obviously people are valuing the experience they are getting from games. So there's another side to this, and it's a very hotly debated topic, and there is some research behind it. This is from Shao and Wang in 2019, where they actually show that violent games do causally affect behavior. So there is a correlation between behavior and people playing games. However, these type of games, conventional games, are not made for behavior change. They're actually made for entertainment. So for entertaining games, their side project or their side or a byproduct was behavior change. Well, we as system dynamists often try and make that our goal, but then we don't always achieve that. So that's interesting to note, right? Their byproduct is behavior change. So a different way to look at that is a new field that's kind of been emerging for the past few years, and it's called serious games. And that's where the games are designed with the intention for behavior change. It's not just a game for entertainment. It's actually a game to give meaning and learning for people. So serious game examples are the beer game. The beer game is actually a serious game that you don't realize that you're learning about the nightmare that can happen when logistics are not managed properly. En-ROADS is another international, actually like a workshop they use in a gaming format, but it's you give people the ability to make decisions on a global scale and see how difficult it is. I remember when I played this in 2017, I believe, or 16. I was amazed at how difficult it is to reach the emission targets we set. It's really not a simple process, and this environment allowed me to experience that firsthand, the decisions and the difficulty it is for those global leaders of us to make those decisions. And finally, Monopoly. Did you know Monopoly was actually initially not created as a family game? It was created to show us the problems with the capitalistic system if we do not create balancing loops. And that's why when Yuna mentioned earlier that most of the games end in someone throwing the board, it was designed to do that, to show us that if we don't create, there's will be one or two players that own everything and the rest of the players have nothing, and there's no point in continuing the game anymore. That was by design, to show people the destructive pattern that capitalism, without being controlled in the best way, can create. So you're actually been playing serious games without knowing. So let me give you a little bit definition about these games and how they are kind of defined. And this, I won't do justice to it here, but I just want to show you that a normal game, the way we think about is maybe entertainment based and sports and board games in this space. But then you get computer games, which is kind of on the other side of it. And then you've got training simulations. And I think system dynamics kind of falls into this simulation space here. Even like we have our space here, but now if we can combine that to become like more of an interactive session between different people to give them an experience with good multimedia and that it feels like they are having fun, then it can be a serious game with serious purpose. So now that's where I get to here. That's why we developed the serious games. We're trying to develop a serious game for the Water Nexus. The Water Nexus specifically, as I will explain in the next few slides. So the Water Nexus itself, for those of you who don't know, is it's about the interconnections between water, energy, and food. There is too much to explain quickly, but in essence, you need to clean water is needed to produce food. But then in the process of producing food, you actually affect the water quality. You can deteriorate it. In the process of using, to produce energy, you need water as well. In South Africa, we need a lot of water to produce electricity. A lot of people don't know, but without clean water, we will have no electricity. That's the essence of it. But when you produce electricity, you also affect the water quality. And you need energy to actually pump water. So those two are very deeply connected. Then food can be used as in bioenergy to produce energy, by energy production. And energy, again, is used to produce food. All these things are so interconnected, and so it's not just that they're interconnected, it's also that we don't fully understand them. There's not enough research on all of these connections in between that we can actually quantify this. Add to this climate change, and we don't know how it's exactly going to affect us, but it will definitely increase or decrease the rainfall what we're expecting at this point is that we will have increased rainfall in rainy seasons, and we will have decreased rainfall in seasons where we don't normally get as much rain. So it's going to create massive oscillations in our rainfall patterns. And those are all things we don't fully understand. So if that was the only problem, maybe we could look at and solve it. But that's not the essence of the problem in Nexus. After deep investigations, and you can read a lot about the Nexus, our biggest problem is the silo mentality. It's not that we don't understand the connections, it's that water doesn't care about food or energy. The people in energy don't care as much about water or food. And this silo mentality is causing much more destruction than the complexity alone of this nexus. And that's where this project's focus is. How can we then use a board game or a game to help us break those silos so that we can start integrating and use our humanity and our ingenuity and our innovation to create solutions that are integrated and systemic. So in 2018, at the South African conference, we had the opportunity to play the Nexus physical board game, which was developed in Europe. And after that, kind of I was inspired to, can I maybe create a simulation that mimics some of these elements, and we can learn something from it. And that is actually at the same time, IC Stella created an ability to create online and multiplayer functionality. So it's kind of a culmination of those two elements, which then resulted in this work to have the ability to progress. In this virtual country of managing this water nexus in this board game, there are 4 players. The one is the Prime Minister, Energy, Water, and Agriculture Minister. Each one of them have responsibilities specifically that only they can control. And their actions have direct influences on the country and on each other. And if any of them make a mistake, all of them will feel it. So then what we then did was we created a workshop around the simulation. I'll give you more about the simulation in a few, but this is the essence of where the simulation started and the target it has. This is one of the structures in the simulation. There are many, many. I'm not going to show everyone because that's too much, but I want to show you, if you use this developer stock and flow simulation for a game, it works differently than for a normal simulation, because in this case, you have to cater for the end user. They're going to make decisions that might not be possible. And one of them you can see here, where it looks strange to connect it like this, but it's connected in this way because the decision they're making and the actual thing that happens may not be the same. And you need to keep track of that. And that's a lot of times what happens in this. Secondly, what's interesting in using simulations like these is there's multiple outflows here. And the order in which these outflow affect the way the simulation works. And that's also another thing that's kind of a tricky nuance when you start using stocks and flows as an end user gaming environment. Okay, so let me show you the workshop purpose. So now you understand we created this simulation, and then to make the simulation useful as a game, we created a workshop around it. So our purpose of that workshop was to create an experience for people to, how does it feel to break those silos? Because if you just go to people and say, hey, we need to break the silos, we need to work together more, it's an age-old story. But if you give them an experience, that might be different, and then get on with the game. So we broke it down into 4 different stages. First we do an icebreaker of interactive questions happening. Then we do the theory behind the energy, water, food, and climate nexus. Then we actually play the game. And finally, we use the iceberg as a systems thinking technique to really get people to delve their thoughts into why are we seeing what's happening, into the mental models and the realities we face and why it's happening. And very interesting things happen. But I'm going to focus on the game for now. So the game itself, this is just a picture of the overall. So as in board games, we have cards to play games. So I also created cards for each player so that it's easier to use and know. Because remember, the Nexus is very complicated. So it takes a while to learn. Even if it's just a game, it still takes a while. So this is the overall game picture. And you'll see the Prime Minister makes a decision where they set a target. the target they set gets communicated to the water, energy, and agriculture ministers. Each of these have different decisions they can make, different ways of actually meeting these targets. And their decisions will affect how much water, energy, and food is produced by the country. That affects the economy and the pollution, and that actually feeds back into the next round of simulation. The environment has a drastic effect on the type of decisions they can make in the country, by depending on the rainfall, the wetlands, and the water in the dam and rivers. There's a lot more detail, but I just want to give you this high level of how the system structure overall flows. And the simulation would do all the very difficult calculations so that people can play the game. Each role, like I mentioned, has specific decisions. Here, the Prime Minister has 2 specific actions they need to take. The Agriculture Minister has 2 specific actions. Energy Minister, too. I want to just mention this: the Energy Minister can choose between coal-fired and renewable, hydropowered, and that creates a very interesting dynamic when people are aware of sustainability, and it puts them in very difficult positions, which is very interesting to see. And then the Water Minister, they can only make one decision, but they can see the big picture in water, and everybody actually should rely on the Water Minister to tell them if there's enough water. But often people don't, and that create problems. So I want to show you the value of using a simulation as a game in disguise. Learning to use simulations can be very tedious. I don't know if any of you have created documents for getting your simulation to be used, but it's a process. And that actually can create many, it takes a long time for people to even learn how to use it. So a game is much easier to learn because the emphasis has been changed from being perfect to that failure is part of learning. Secondly, that you're not here to perform, you're here to explore. And thirdly, it opens a magic circle. And this idea behind the magic circle is people can actually be something different than their work environment has captured them into. So they are more free to be themselves or to explore new ways of being. Interestingly, although that is true, there is real-world elements that emerge. People, the way they interact with each other, they gain that from the way where they're coming from. So you can see that play out in the game. You can also see people's personalities, their skills, their problem solving, and perspective coming very strongly through in these games, which you would often see as inhibited factors in a normal simulation because people are too afraid to be themselves. They just need to be correct. I want to show you, these are 4 simulations that was run, and this was simultaneously done by 16 different people. So that's the power of having an online virtual multiplayer simulation. 16 people were using the simulation at the same time. And by using rooms and teams, then you can actually split them up. And in a very short amount of time, people can really start engaging and really sink their teeth into what needs to be done. But I want to show specific things here. The first 2 time steps here were designed to be exactly the same because we were all doing them together. The last 2 runs, the last 2 time cycles, basically, each group could do their own thing. And just look how every result is very different. This group had a 90 billion rand money in the bank at the end of the day, but they were very polluted. This group had 95 billion rand in the bank, and they were much less polluted, so had more money and less pollution. This group had only 31 billion, and they were very polluted. And this group had almost no money at 20 billion, but they were the cleanest. And you can see how each group, even though they were together the first 2 rounds, reacted completely differently, and they could explore this. So you see real team dynamics emerge, where they come back out of this and they feel like these people, I just went to war with my group. We just faced a war and we overcame it, or we failed, but it's okay because we built these relationships. And that's actually what we see happen. So these are some of the common observations from doing these workshops. I've probably done I think I've taken about maybe 60 people through it at this stage. And these are common observations. The group they're dealt into don't know each other initially. They don't know, they just get randomly allocated to those groups. But at the end of the day, they become teams that are interested in transformation. It's like these connections between them, they want to transform things. it strengthens the bonds between people. These people feel like they are now part of something bigger after playing this game together. They experience the system. They don't just read about it or hear a lecture or like me talking now all the time. That's not what they're doing. They're actually experiencing that system through a simulation, which is very different. And you can see them when they come back, the clocks are turning. They're really thinking about what they just experienced. And what emerges is real world reflections. It doesn't stay in that magic circle. It actually goes to a point of they saying now, wow, wait, what we saw happen here is what we see happen in reality. But the problem is that we don't talk to each other in reality. We're not collaborating in reality. We don't think it's necessary for water and energy to talk to each other. But now we see that if they don't, the whole system fails because it's an accelerated process of learning in the simulation. And they also develop a team identity. It's like each of those teams creates like a fingerprint of who they are in this. And dare I say, they actually have fun. They want to play more rounds. Every single time we've done it, like, can we play more? Can we play more? But then we've run out of time. So we would like to play more, but people want to continue playing. And I think that's also an interesting observation. Unique occurrences that I want to share with you. These are things that don't happen every single time, but it's very interesting to observe them. The first one is some people create like a digital fingerprint. It's like they are now part of something that's going to remain, that they have formed this bond and this bond is going to be with them. Secondly, I want to show this I call it a dictator failure, because in one of the games, right, there was this guy who was the prime minister, and he decided his agriculture minister is not good enough. He or she is incompetent and they're going to take over. And they did do that. What happened then was that the rest of the team suddenly lost all ability to trust each other. And they retreated. And then suddenly they couldn't make decisions anymore. And the whole team failed. And that was a very interesting thing that happened in the simulation that happens in reality. Second one is, you would imagine that if you give them more problems in those spaces, that they would stop working. But the opposite happened. Because this is a fun game, they are actually self-organizing themselves. So if there's problems, they would work together. They would find solutions to those problems together. They would collaborate to find those solutions, which doesn't happen normally when it's just a simulation. The Iron Lady is an interesting one, where this person, this specific woman, was at not a high level in the organization. And she was leading people who was on a high level in the organization. But the way she did it was so good that they respected her and called her the Iron Lady. I mean, it's the flip of people in higher positions giving kind of, kudos to a person in a younger position because of her good leadership skills, even though she doesn't have a leadership position at that point. And day zero, this was an interesting one. We won, the group initially was doing so well. They did very well in the first round that they thought, we don't need to worry. We can just do whatever we want in the second round. And it resulted in chaos. They used up all their water. They lost all. They went from 100 billion in the bank to 5 billion. They lost 95 billion in one round. I've never seen that happen before. But it shows you the pride and the fall that often happens when we think we know something too well or do too well. Lastly, I want to share some quotes with you. I'm not going to go into detail, but I think this is the main quote. These are quotes from the participants themselves. This participant said, "It increased our cognitive understanding of the system, our sense of agency and understanding of connectedness, why this matters and why it is meaningful to act on the challenge." It's just not just about understanding, it's about agency and acting. And that for me is powerful stuff when we have been trying to get people to think differently by just using simulations. I'm not going to go into all the detail of these four, but I want to show each of these are referencing elements of where the policies in reality are not connected. The water, energy, and food policies are not talking to each other. And through the simulation, you can see that by not doing that, you create destructive systems. But in reality, it takes such a long time to see those effects that often people ignore where they use events to explain away. Oh no, it's this minister or that one person, that's the fault actually that's happening. But it's much more deeper than that. So in conclusion, do we use simulations or do we use games? Do we call it simulation? Do we call it game? And I would go and say that's the wrong question. I would say that we can use simulations and games. And that for me is a serious game. It's no longer a game for entertainment. It's a game for change. And change is something we desperately need. So Stella we've also seen how Stella can be successfully used for an online interactive multiplayer series game, having multiple sessions at the same time. That I think it's wonderful to see that being able to do that. It's enabling us as system analysts to actually explore that. So it's just very important for you to note that if you decide to do that, you'll spend much more time on your user interface and designing a user experience, because it's going to be all about your end user experience. So the preliminary results, just as an overview, is that people have increased interaction, discussion, agency, energy, and learning taking place. You see this. It's like it's like a fire. They just want to keep going. It's the opposite of trying to teach people how to use a simulation. If any of you have ever tried to do that and it's a complicated simulation, you'll understand that this is not always what you see happening. Then there's deep and realistic thinking happening. They don't just keep it in the simulation, in the game world. They take it back into their real world. And they start asking questions, much deeper questions about the structures and how we're interacting and the feedbacks that exist. That wasn't necessarily in their mind before they played the game. And then finally, I love this, the real world reflections that's coming up. And they self-identify that, look, guys, we're not, if we can just talk a bit more, if we can just collaborate a bit more, there's so much more potential than trying to do everything on your own in a little silo. So I want to leave the final question to you. What do you think is a good simulation game for change that you think we need? So I think this is the end of what I wanted to give to you guys, and I want to open up the floor to questions or comments, and especially if you have some ideas on how to use simulation games for change. Thank you for listening and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Cornel, for a very, very wonderful presentation. So now we have the floor open. If you do have a question, please do unmute yourself and ask. It might be a question, it might be a comment, it might be whatsoever that you actually have to say, please. You can actually speak now.
Corneille, it's Andres here. You mentioned that you know, the complexity when you've got multiple outflows, that you need to look at the computational sequence to make sure that the priority flow gets prioritized. How did you make sure that that happened in the model, or did you just allow the model to do what it does?
So that's a good question, Andres. So if you go, let me go back to that. Let me this. I'm not going to open up the full simulation now because that might take too long, but I want to just show you, if you in Stella, it allows you, the new Stella versions, you can actually open up these flows, and each flow has a priority. If you want to change that priority, it's quite a trick. What I did was I would disconnect all the outflows, and then I would ask myself, what is the most important flow in this system that needs to go first? Then that flow I'll connect first, and then the second flow, and then the third flow, fourth flow, and fifth flow. The order in which you connect them actually alters the priority of that flow. I don't know if there's another way to do it, but Dr. Witter, that's how I did it there. I'm not sure if I'm answering the right question here. Please ask again if I didn't.
No, you answered the right question. There's ways and means. As I said, I'll remind me to do us a blog on that, because there's some tips that I've learned over the years how to make sure your priorities run properly.
Thanks, Dr. Witter. And I think and it's something that I only emerged from this after I noticed that it's not doing what after testing of it. The testing validation part of this was just insane, because I know that a lot of people are going to use it at the end of the day. So Then it started doing things that I don't agree with, and then I found out its priorities of the flows. Thank you, Dan.
Hi, Connie. This is
Yes,
Gift here.
Gift, please.
Yes. No, congratulations for the wonderful work. I just want to find out, how long did it take to put together this model?
Oh, Gift, that is also a brilliant question. So there's the model part of it, and then there's the interface part of it. The model part of it, the first iteration I had, I really pushed myself, right? Because after I attended the game in 2018, I mean, that's the only exposure I had. So then I had to rebuild this, trying to rebuild it from memory in some way to capture some of the details. So in that week after, I sat till late hours every day to rebuild something that kind of mimics the game I saw. So the structure itself was kind of, the first iteration was in about a week, but then it took about another year to get everything validated, verified, working, and the interface to connect well with what I want the user to experience. So that's the long and short answer, Gift. It took about more than a year to get everything connected well.
Well done, well done.
Thanks, Gift. So if there is no other, thank you, Diane, for the question. Oh, okay. So I see. Yes, you can email me definitely, and I would love to share how we currently use it as a teaching aid. The workshop I spoke about in this whole presentation is the one we designed it for, and I co-designed it with Dr. Steve Matetsa and Kabir Teob, which also works in Eskom with me on the Water Nexus project itself. But I've also used this in another workshop as a way to get people to communicate and integrate and talk to each other very successfully. It takes a bit of time to get used to and set up, but yeah, I don't know. I know I'm passionate about this. This is I'm biased completely, but I'm excited to see how team dynamics change for using a complex simulation to play a game and how people just want to collaborate thereafter. Is there anybody else in the audience that yes, sorry.
So how do you choose your players? Is it only those who have knowledge of system dynamics, or how do you choose the players that you actually include in the game?
Good question. Okay, so in this case, the two workshops we did, the one is specifically in our organization in Eskom. So we have very diverse groups. Then, I mean, we allow basically anyone to participate. Let me show you just in terms of what the person probably needs to have in order to play the game. And for me, that's the brilliance of how IC Systems have set up the software. Let me just quickly get the link. So as long as you've got Google, if you've got Google Chrome, you can literally you can use it. If your computer doesn't want to use Google Chrome, you can even use it on your phone. So we allow basically anyone to participate as long as you've got access to internet, access to Google Chrome, either on your computer or on your phone. You don't need any knowledge about system dynamics. This is more oriented towards a game. So I slowly go through the process and teaching every person how to actually use it. But when you load it, it asks your nickname. So I can just say here CJ, and then I can say let's create a new room, a new session, test session, and then there's all the roles. I can create multiple other sessions and so that we can start the game. Let me quickly show that. I don't want to spend too much time, but I want to show you this part of it to show you how kind of easy they've made it so that anybody can join at any point in time. I can share this link with you now, and you will see that this is available there. If I join now, you need 2 roles at least to fulfill. The other roles are optional. The game master is the one controlling the game. So now when I say click ready to start there and ready to start here, the game will start. I'm not going to go into more detail, but this is now the game is ready to start and you can start playing. And do you see how quick and easy it is to start a new game? And because you can run on your phone, it really enhances the range of people you can target. Okay. Young, I went all the roads. Did I answer your question properly?
Yeah, I know, yes, it is quite interesting. Especially for those who might, like be interested in learning about system dynamics. Are just playing games like these that are interactive can actually really get them interested in the concept and maybe get them to learn more about system dynamics. Like, can this be used in classrooms, like to teach in schools? Like, how is this practical in using it as a learning tool or as a teaching tool for students?
Very good question, Young. So I like to also reference how other people have used games like these in system dynamics. They don't just put the game on its own. They develop a whole workshop around it so that you give time for people to learn the game. You need a lot of time for people to learn the game. Once they've learned it, it's actually really, really fun for them to start playing it, but it takes time. And then after they've played the game, it's essential to give space for reflection. So they can go back and reflect on the game, talk about what the experience is. That's such a big part of this process. And that's why we developed a workshop around it. So with the workshop, one component, this interactive game, that's one component of it. But then we put things before and after to get people into it and reflect on it. So in a classroom environment, I foresee this as being very useful and definitely being able to take root there. If you give students a chance to learn the game the first day, or you can probably learn the game in about an hour and a half, and thereafter, once they've learned the game, they can play as many rounds as they want to. Young, again, I'm not sure if I answered your question properly.
Yeah. Yes, you did. Thank you. It was quite interesting. I'm basically learning about this particular one for the first time. So I'm going to be getting in touch with you perhaps to learn more. So
I'd love
thank
that.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Young. So thank you, Christine, also for the link in the chat. Would you like to explain a bit more about it, Christine, if you want to?
She said something like she was on her break and she couldn't.
Yes. Okay, cool. So, Christine, it seems like it's how to playing games from the WPI. So I think that's a brilliant resource to probably use in conducting these games and how to use them. So, guys, check out the chat, and I'm also going to use it. So, please do that. And thanks to both of your comments. In essence, I'm going to stop presenting. Just ask you guys, like,
stop recording.
Oh, sorry, I shouldn't stop. Let me not stop. Let me share my presentation again. I want to make you aware that I know I said a lot, but in essence, can you see that the Nexus problem wasn't a problem about getting people to understand every piece of the dynamic of that system, because it's actually impossible. It's a complex adaptive system. Complex adaptive systems, we cannot simulate them. What's more important is for people to embrace their own agency and their ability to collaborate. And that's why we chose a game in this case. If you try to simulate the water nexus, I can promise you it will be wrong. Every simulation is wrong. Some simulations are just more useful than others. But don't try and use a simulation for a complex adaptive system to give people answers because simple answers, because I think you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. So in this case, it was more meaningful to have it as a collaborative simulation. Okay, talking a lot again. So I would like to hear from you. Anybody else in the audience, have you thought about using games before in where you are? I would like to hear from any of you. Like, have you thought about ways you can use games?
So maybe Corneille, my experience with games is often when there's perceived output complexity, people automatically assume that the computer is doing some magic in the background that's causing the problem, and that it's not real. So my experience is when people have played a game on a board, then it's sort of the reality kicks in that it's real. And when you can translate that into the game format, that people realize that the outcome is a result of maybe 3 different small decisions and some time delay and something accumulating, and you then see the outcome, that it's not the outcome, the complexity is a result of complex decisions. Sometimes the outcome is a result of simple decisions just badly made.
Yes.
And my experience, as I say, my experience is that unless you can get people to physically see that game and translate it to the world they interact with, and then come back and show them it on a computer, it's actually very difficult for people to learn and change behavior. I found it better to use the games to develop algorithms to then replace their bad decision making and embed the decisions that they don't even know that the decisions are being made for them based on what we learn through these exercises. Because I mean, you've seen the different things that happen